Yeah, I know. I do the same. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to the next session. And the next presentation is by Francesca Citron. The title is My Academic Journey Through Different Languages and Cultures. Francesca is from the Department of Psychology here at Lancaster University. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. So this is very much of a personal journey. So I put some pictures, and I'll mention academia because obviously academia made me travel around. It's not too much about academic career. Okay, so I'm a lecturer in psychology, and my research does happen to be on language. So I study how people process language, how they understand language, and I also look at brain activity. So I look at what happens in the brain as we understand sentences and texts and so on. So obviously it's very pertinent, the whole thing. And then I'm originally from Italy, from Milan. So that's just some pictures about my city. And yeah, so already as a child, so the story with multilingualism started when I was a little child, because my grandparents took me with them for many trips. So I've been abroad, I've been in different countries. So I traveled a lot, and that exposed me to different countries and cultures and food and languages. And then my mom was a language teacher. So when I was a child, she would teach me, she would make me listen to French lullabies or teach me some foreign words in some languages. So, I'm not an early bilingual, but I got exposed to different things. So I guess this sparked my passion for languages. And then in school, like in compulsory school, I studied English, French, and German. And then, yeah, that's it. So then when I finished my my high school, I decided, that's it. I want to go out and explore the world. So I took a kind of 1 year of sabbatical instead of starting university straight away. And I went to do a European voluntary service in Germany. So I went to Furtwangen, which is a very small village, like 9,000 inhabitants, in the Black Forest, which is southern West Germany, which looks beautiful, as you can see here. But it's also, it can become really, really, really cold in winter. So the snow arrives in November, settles down, and never leaves until April. So we have meters of snow, snowing every day. And then, the snow is removed by, some machines on the road every single day. And, it's like that. It's beautiful. It's white for many months. But it gets to minus 20 degrees. So it was quite a big difference, from compared to where I'm from. And yeah, and so this was really interesting because, so the challenges of well, I'll show you one more picture. So I was working as a volunteer, because I mentioned the voluntary service, in a school for mentally and physically disabled children. This was my class. So I was in a class from 16 to 20 years of age. So actually adolescents, older, young adults. And I really enjoyed the project. So the challenges of this experience is, of course, I'm in a very different place. I start from scratch. I have few friends, and the language, even though I had studied it in school, I didn't have enough vocabulary. So obviously in the first 3 months, I really used English to help, And then after 3 months, I acquired enough words. And then, I started to just only speak in German. So it was challenging initially, but I loved the project. I loved working with these children, adolescents. And yeah, so and then the advantages were, of course, the first thing is that after 1 year there, my German became fluent. But also the most important part was the exposure to a different culture, and then seeing things from a very different perspective. So, I mentioned the snow. So I was like, no wonder these people are not as warm as we are, because, look at where they live and how the majority of their year looks, And so it was, that was the year that was the trigger for me, because it's like, okay, if you go to a different country, you get a different perspective, you get a more open mind, And so it really, made a difference in my life. And then what I didn't mention is there was a support network. So we were not left in the dark, we volunteers. So we would, these are other volunteers that either worked in the Black Forest or they worked in Alsace in France. And they were from all over Europe. And basically, so the EBS organized seminars or workshops. So the first one was 10 days, and then the other ones were like 3 days, where all the volunteers would meet up. Often this was done in Strasbourg, so in Alsace. And we would meet up and spend time together and share our challenges, our difficulties with the project and so on. And so there was a really nice network of support, but also a melting pot of different cultures and languages. And the nice thing is, when we started off with these, let's call them seminars, like residentials. Okay, when we started off with these residentials, so the educators, the people that were looking after us, they were speaking in 3 languages: English, German, and French, because these were the relevant languages. And we, among each other, we started off with English. And then as we became more and more fluent, either in German or in French, then we just switched and English got dropped off. So obviously English is the best language to talk to different people when, it's the common language that everyone speaks, but then it doesn't allow you to go deeper into the culture. And then, so the advantage of learning different languages is really you can access the culture much more in depth. And so that's the whole thing. And half of my presentation is on, not half, but almost half, a large portion is on the Black Forest. So don't worry, I'm gonna move on at some point. This was the enthusiastic girl that I used to be. I still think I am, but somehow I'm aging. Another important aspect is toward the end of my year in the Black Forest, I connected to a Portuguese community that was in Fort Wangen, this little village. So there was a big Portuguese community, and they also often made friends with Italians. I didn't actually meet many Italians. It was more like the partner of the Portuguese friends. And so I got exposed to this different culture, which was quite interesting because obviously it was toward the end of my year, so I could just focus on German and improve my German. And then toward the end, then I got exposed to this Portuguese culture because I met some people. Some of them were speaking Italian, but then it didn't matter anymore. My German was fluent, I could switch, and it was really nice because obviously we had, by being Mediterranean, we had cultural similarities, but also there were also foreigners like me, and so I could relate, and it was really nice to bond with them. And then obviously I started to appreciate this language, which initially sounded quite rough to me, and then I appreciated its melody, and after that I studied it for a few years because it's just a beautiful language. And so that was, I think, my year. Let me see if I forgot anything. Yeah, so I told you about the challenges and advantages. And so then after this year, I moved back to Italy. So in Italy, I studied psychology. So it was the old system. So I studied for 5 years. It used to be, like bachelor and master kind of. Obviously, I studied psychology and I took many options in linguistics because, that's my research. And by side, I kept learning languages as a hobby. So I started with some Spanish because I always wanted to learn it. But then I really was into Portuguese because of this exposure. So I studied it for 3 years very deeply. So I became fluent. And yeah, I just love it as a language. And then I had to suppress my Spanish because they were too similar. And my Spanish was really like low proficiency. So I had to suppress it completely to learn the Portuguese verbs. Otherwise, I would mix up the endings. And then, during those 5 years, it's a long time. So I also studied some ancient Greek because I'm naturally interested in, the origin of words. And, for us Italians, I mean, even though I didn't have formal Latin, Latin is relatively, most of our words are similar to Latin. So ancient Greek really made it, to understand better how certain Italian words, where they come from, what they actually mean, they are Italian words that come from Greek. So it was really an eye-opener, so really, really nice. Anyway, I kept up my German, I had German friends, I had little jobs because obviously I was doing some little jobs to, to pay my whatever during the university time. And so that was good. And then, in Milan, it's, a melting pot of different cultures and things. So I kept making friends with foreigners from different countries. And so on. And then I visited Portugal for a relatively long period, and I stayed with locals. So that was also a nice exposure to the Portuguese culture. And during this period, well, early on in my degree, I had a clear vocation. I wanted to become a scientist, and I was interested in language processing. So it was quite clear to me that I wanted to go for an academic career. And so I applied for a scholarship. And I got this scholarship from, it was a fellowship, let's say, so I was a PI, and it was from the Council of Milan. It was for 1 year, and with that money, I went to Leipzig. I'll tell you in a second. So here's just to show you where things are. So here is Milan in the north, in the center of the north, and then, this is Germany, so you go up a bit, and, southwest Germany here was Furtwangen near Freiburg. So I stayed there for a year, came back, and then during my 5 years in Italy, I also, had some exchanges with Portugal. And let's move on. Okay, so then I came to Leipzig. I worked at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Neuroscience, which is this fancy building. So Leipzig was really nice. It was nice to be able to speak German, because then I could connect very easily with colleagues and so on, appreciate the local culture, go to theater, cinema. So obviously, it's an advantage for you, because you can actually appreciate, be more integrated in the country. It didn't have immediate academic benefits. However, I learned to talk about my research in German, to present my research in German. So obviously there are advantages. And of course, it was prestigious to be at the Max Planck Institute. I learned a lot in terms of neuroscience and things like that, and methods. And the challenges were, even though I had already lived in Germany, the culture was completely different from the Black Forest, really, really, really different. And so every time, it's a new thing, even if you're partly familiar with the country. And then the other challenge was that there was a lot of competition. Obviously, the Max Planck Institute is quite competitive, so there was a lot of, envy, competition between people, not necessarily with me. And this is something that I think the German system suffers from, and it's not really nice, which is a shame, because otherwise it's a great system for other reasons. So that was it. And then obviously I was trying to look for a PhD program. And then so that's just to show you where Leipzig is. So it's northeast. Obviously it's the ex-DDR, is Germany. So very, very different culture from here. So then I got a PhD scholarship to do my PhD at the University of Sussex. My topic was language. I don't go into detail about my research, it doesn't matter. So this is Brighton, so it's, it's like a holiday place, very open-minded, very alternative, so I had a great time. Then there's also very nice nature. This is my mom, this is me, so I really had a nice time. And so what are the advantages of Sussex? So first of all, very different academic culture, very good in my view, very horizontal relationships. I found a lot of support academically and socially. I learned a lot. So for me, it was a really good environment to, feel supported, connected, and so on. So really, really great time. Obviously, Brighton makes a difference, but I think also the university and the department, And the challenges, I think English, because of course, so my English was good school English plus good academic English. So obviously, because I'm an academic, I could present at conferences, write manuscripts in English. So that was my proficiency in English. But the everyday English, actually, I kind of like neglected it for years, because I was interested in the specific languages and the specific cultures. And so I was like, no, English is the language that makes everything flat and doesn't keep the differences. So I actually ignored the everyday English. I wasn't watching films in English or anything. So actually the challenge was the everyday language, which took me some time to pick up. And then obviously, initially I was really tired, because it is a different country, and even though we're taught about, you know, the British culture when we learn English at school, still it's a fully new thing. So, but it was really, really good, really interesting. But yeah, it takes some time. And then, yeah, this is my, just to show you the social bit. So half of my friends were British and the other half were from all over the world. And these are some of my best friends. And so this Kirsten is from Australia, she's from Estonia, she's from Greece. So I really had, you know, this melting pot. You know, I was in touch with many different cultures. This is my PhD supervisor, who's German, by the way. So yeah, it was very good. And then I moved on. So I need to look for a postdoc. And so I looked for a postdoc. And yeah, so speaking multiple languages has never been had, in my view, has never had a direct benefit in my academic career, but many indirect benefits. So when it came to look for a postdoc, I applied in many different countries in Europe, and I got 2 offers. One was in Berlin, and that was a collaboration between Berlin and Princeton. I'll tell you about this in a second. And the other job offer was in Milan, so I could choose. And okay, so the reason why I was offered the job was actually my scientific expertise, especially for Berlin. They wanted someone who knew the neuroscientific methods. So that was what got me the job. But being fluent in German and being a native speaker of Italian definitely helped me in the selection process. So there's always something, you know, there's some advantage, but it's more indirect. And so I accepted Berlin with no doubts. So that's my happy face landing in Berlin on the day. And so I did a postdoc, which was initially 2 years, and then I was lucky enough to get it extended for another 2 years. And it was the Cluster of Excellence Languages of Emotion, which means it's an interdisciplinary group that got a lot of money from the government, and they have plenty of money to do research. And so it was good in many ways. So first of all, I could use the scanners. I could run many neuroimaging experiments, which are extremely expensive, and they were all funded by the cluster. So that's great. Second, I got to work with Adele Goldberg, who's a professor of psychology at Princeton University. So she was my boss. And then the funding would allow for her to visit me and for me to go to her. So I also got exposed to Princeton, which I'll show you some pictures of later. So scientifically, it was great. So prestigious place, prestigious people to work with, money for expensive research, which, you know, I don't get easily in my lectureship, of course. That was my lab in Berlin. So these are 2 Canadian students visiting Berlin for 2 months, working for me for free, full time, because they were funded. This is a visiting student from, how are you doing for time? A visiting student for, from Princeton, and then interns, German interns who were living in Berlin. Yeah, so easy, like, okay, Berlin, I enjoyed the city. I talked about the academic advantages. It was easy because culture-wise, it was not very different. I think the only challenge was housing in Berlin. That was the main challenge. And then again, this competitiveness in the academic system, the academic German system. Otherwise, easy life, you know, culture, history, and so on. And easy culture-wise because, you know, Leipzig and Berlin are not too far off in terms of culture. And that's just to show you Princeton. So I got to spend 2 months in Princeton initially, and then 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks. So I got exposed to Adele's lab. So this is her lab at Princeton. And then, yeah, so that was also quite interesting. A bit of a culture shock because you think you are fluent in English, then you go there and then you don't understand half of the words they're using. But anyway, it was really nice. And so I have 1 minute, but I think I'm almost done. So just trying to think of whether I left anything out. I don't think so, actually. And then, so this is my journey again. So from Milan, I told you I went to Leipzig, then Sussex, and then Berlin, and then I was traveling to Princeton, and then I landed in Lancaster. And I used this metaphor, landed, because, you know, it was really the happy place where I landed finally, and it gave me a lot of stability because, you know, it's a permanent job and the university is good, and the department, the research in the department was in line with my research, and I found it very supportive. Also, there's a great linguistics department with which I'm interested in collaborating. So yeah, so that's why I like to say, landed there. Yeah, I mean, here everything is great. I enjoy nature, as you can see. The only downside is, of course, I focused on English. So while I was in Germany, I would speak German all the time, but then still use English for my academic career. And then here, everything ends up being in English. So I kind of kept up my German at the beginning by organizing a German pub. And then I dropped it because I didn't find enough interested people. It was too hard. And then so I felt like I've been dropping my languages, not keeping them active, which is a bit of a shame. But I also developed other interests because I had the stability. And so, I tried hard to create a good work-to-life balance. Well, when I was in Berlin, I was just, working to get publications, get the permanent job. And so maybe I developed other interests like yoga and walking and so on. So obviously, maybe my languages are going to come back again and I'm going to refresh them again. But I'm so happy to be at this conference because I heard many inspiring talks that, give me motivation to, refresh my languages and keep practicing them. And my motto is explore and enjoy. So it's very general, but, it's about learning languages, exploring different cultures, and so on. Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Francesca. Are there questions? Okay, Susannah, and you can put your people in the chat also online. Please put your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I think you said at the start you had to stop Spanish because it was interfering too much with your Portuguese, and I guess I found the same with Italian. Have you ever been able to go back to the Spanish or?
I think this interference, you get it a lot, especially if you are non-fluent in the language, because once you become fluent, it's fine. But because my Spanish was just basic, I had to suppress it. I never went back to it because I didn't have a reason. I never needed it for work. I loved Portuguese. But if I go to Spain, I'm able to communicate and so on. And then, okay, now even my Portuguese is rusty, but yeah, so now obviously if I'm in Spain, initially a few years ago, many years ago, I would get a lot of interference from Portuguese. And now I think I can separate them more. But, my Spanish is really very basic, but it's just like when I'm there, why would I speak English? You see what I mean? It's so much easier and, it's easier for Italians. So yeah, it's more separated now, but I was fluent in Portuguese, so I could separate them. Yeah, thank you.
Luis.
So I've got a difficult question, and I would expect it to be tricky for maybe more than only Francesca. There seem to be, after a few presentations, there seem to be two big schools, which is the one that says, well, languages are useful to do sciences and languages are not useful to do science. So my question is, how do you think, because I'm definitely in the school that languages are useful to do science. I'm on that side. So whenever do you see your networking as a business? You're trying to sell something, and if you sell it in the person's language, that's pretty much how I feel being a Portuguese little country with a colony that is huge and speaks a hugely different Portuguese that has largely, so that's pretty much how I feel. So I feel the need personally to say, well, if that one is speaking another language, I'll try to speak his language in order to convince him or her of my point of view. So that's how I see it's useful in science, in order to reach further, and so that to persuade, definitely. That's how I see it.
Yes, I mean, I totally see your point, and I'm actually happy that you're making it. For me, I've been definitely more competitive and more skillful by speaking different languages. But for me, the key has been the open-mindedness and knowing about different cultures that has helped me in networking and being open-minded. In my field, at least in my own research, I'm not even talking about psychology, it's not that I collaborate with companies, it's more like with other scientists. And so I don't feel that, obviously, it helped me. So setting up a collaboration with Germans is easier because I also speak their language, so it helps me to connect, but I wouldn't say that, it helped me to have more collaborations than if I hadn't spoken those languages, if that makes sense. It's more the open-mindedness, but obviously that's my own personal experience. And, I look forward to having your experiences.
Okay.
So it didn't give me more workforce for my research or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, yes, I mean, Luis, I think it's very good that you use the word selling, because when we wish to collaborate with people, when we present at conferences, we are basically selling. And as the German Chancellor Willy Brandt said, if I'm buying, I speak your language. But if I'm selling, if I'm selling, I speak your language. But if I'm buying, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen. And actually, I think I completely agree with you as well, Francesca, that also we've talked a lot in this conference about the other benefits of learning language, besides simply transmitting information. And I mean, I won't repeat what everybody else has said now, but certainly the change in mentality that you get from learning other languages is useful. I mean, if I may make a controversial statement here, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that speaking English is not in itself a sign of open-mindedness. I think that in my personal experience, many people who have learned English as a first language at many universities outside the Anglophone world, they're not really speaking English. They're sort of speaking their own language using English words. You see this a lot in the Netherlands in particular. I'm not trying to attack the Netherlands in particular, but although, because of their culture, I'm sure they will appreciate me talking in a very direct manner about them. Then so language is more than actually simply, as you said, transmitting information. It's actually about being open-minded. And I have to say, in my experience, with many of Dutch people who I've worked together with, they may have good language skills, but they don't really appreciate, the function, of language beyond transmitting information. And many will be actually surprised that you want to learn Dutch, because they only think, well, why do you want to learn our language if we can say everything in English? And so I would say to these people, jullie hebben taalkennis, maar je hebben niet geen kennis van de betekenis van taal. Dus that if you but I mustn't start going on about it. And so, do we have any more questions for Francesca? They will appreciate. Okay, good. Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much, Francesca, for sharing your experiences. We will